Welcome to the next edition of the Tech Vault with myself, Mitchel Sellers. Today, I've got TJ Turner from TD SYNNEX here to talk about going to Azure and why a CSP or a cloud solutions partner is such a important part of the process and why navigating Azure on your own without any experience or with maybe limited experience can be such a troubling, costly, or potentially even security uh, related issue. TJ, thanks for joining us today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do for TD SYNNEX and how that relates to Azure?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm TJ Turner, one of the solution architects. That's what they call all of us on our little team. About 20 of us here on the pre-sales engineering side of the house for all of your Microsoft needs. My team is split against 10 engineers on the Azure side, and there's another 10 engineers for the modern workplace side. And then some of us little sprinkle in here and there, crossover with security and a little bit of dynamics as well for those who need dynamics help. Um, my background has been in IT for over 25 years, mostly all of it in infrastructure, ranging from point of sale, retail type systems to high volume trading financial firms, and even software as a service organizations who are, leading and blazing the trail around those cloud related technologies.
Fantastic. Well, great to have you today. And one of the things that I think is really interesting, right? We have been a Microsoft partner for years and a cloud solutions provider as well for a long time, and we have our specializations and everything in the partner network. And one of the things that we do for our customers, and our customers understand it, is we take a lot of the fear out of moving to the cloud. We are able to be that point of contact so they're not just grabbing from the period, the collection of resources, right? One of the things we were talking about before we started recording was there's so many things out here when we talk about the cloud.
Hmm.
And so, one of the things that we do is we help kind of navigate that process. And one of the things that's interesting, right? You mentioned you're a pre-sales support kind of thing, and you're a resource that's just available to us. And so one of the things that's kind of interesting is that when we want to bring somebody to the cloud, especially those that have existing infrastructure, a lot of times, you and I were talking about the fact that, somebody may have their special data center, special configurations. And that's really where you come into play or your team comes into play to help us. Can you talk a little bit about what that process looks like when we want to try to help do that pre-sales piece where somebody has existing infrastructure and why it's so valuable to be working with a CSP rather than trying to, go at it alone?
Sure. And there's lots of resources and obviously lots of, learning materials out there. However, what we do at TD SYNNEX is try to bring, the best engineers to the table for you, our partner. And then in turn, what that gives your customer is the ability to say, okay, hey, my knowledge may be limited at this, and then I can bring my distributor, TD SYNNEX, along and say, hey, do these things work the way they work? Because the way that I find that I do when my job works most effectively is when I get to say no, it doesn't work like that. However, if we put these two things together, it will work the way you want it to work. And I mean, I'll have a lot of partners and I have a lot of end customers who say, I've been looking for this call for the last 2 months. Why, when can I wish could have gotten here sooner, which would have been great. And so we as the engineers get to be that, that wonderful tool to get to those, get those solutions done correctly so that you're not just being, sold an IT service, right? We all hate being sold, IT sales and IT services that just, oh, well, it gets me 80% of the way there, not all the way where I want to go. Right. And I think that's why working through partners and working in the CSP space allows us to get you, even if you want to bring a third party tool in and being not that it's, only Microsoft, but there's ways of including all of those pieces, because we're, not just a Microsoft shop. We can do a lot of different services in the place to make sure you get the right solution as opposed to just a solution.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. One of the things, that I think is true in the Azure space, I talk about it a lot in the .NET space as well. We have amazing amounts of documentation, right? The Azure team has deployment scenario guides for multi-regional deployments. They have disaster recovery documentation, right? The documentation's there, but there's so much documentation. And right here, this table of resources, periodic table of resources that you have here
Hmm.
shows, and this is only some, right, of the things that are in Azure. It's probably some of the more common ones. And how you assemble those is something that, those of us that are doing this and that we've been doing this a long time, right? It's your job to architect these solutions.
Right.
For myself and my team, right, we're implementing a little bit more laser focused in the things that we do every day. So there's areas of this, right? There's portions of, this table of resources that I'd say my team is 100% aware of. And then there's other ones where I'm like, hey, that's going to be we get TJ on the call. And I think one of the biggest
Absolutely.
things that we get with this power of, a combination of a partner like my company, the, the partnership that we have then with TD SYNNEX, and then as it relates to Microsoft, is we have the ability to kind of pull in multiple different resources at places that if you just go to Azure on your own, you're not necessarily going to be able to get to the table. And one of the things, that we can do is obviously we can bring your solutions, one of your solutions architects in. It's done at no cost, right? So we can do that as
That's
part of the
right.
pre-sales piece.
Hmm.
But then if we get further along, right, we also have the ability, I have my channels and you have your channels, to get even Microsoft involved, right?
Yep.
Which is something that if you go out and create a new Azure account, unless you're spending a boatload of money, you're not going to get directly into a Microsoft connection and get Microsoft support. We have mechanisms where we can do it pretty quickly, right? To get
Hmm.
feedback or, get something figured out. And I think that that's one of those big areas too of, how do we actually make that connection from customer into Azure, give that point of sale. And I'm sure that you've had prime examples, right, where we've been able to do things that maybe you couldn't have done otherwise.
Yeah, and again, I mean, as TD SYNNEX, we're one of Microsoft's largest distributors, right? So that lends us, a little fewer, or lends us a little bit more, visibility inside the Microsoft ecosystem and support, mechanism. You, even as an MVP, I'm sure you have, your channels to go to. But the beautiful thing is, what we also offer within the TD SYNNEX space is, yeah, if you're doing a big migration or you're moving a lot of things into Azure, right, and it's going to be a lot of money, Microsoft is definitely going to help you. However, when you get to below a certain number, things just kind of, well, that's not important to us. But to TD SYNNEX, it's very important to us, and we even get money. And have services within inside TD SYNNEX that can help you make sure that those migrations and or those services are effective for you. Migrations for us, because we kind of facilitate the SMB marketplace, right? We have lots of programs that we can help you do those migrations with. Not just for you as the partner, but the end customer, right? We know that Azure's, the next up and coming thing, right? Not to just throw numbers out there, but the last I was told, like last year, about Azure has an 8% market penetration, right? 12% is usually when things start going like gangbusters and crazy. So Azure is almost right there on that verge of just being the almost de facto standard of, moving things and doing things in the cloud. I don't know what that tipping point is going to be, but we're here and we're ready for it. We're ready for you, and we have lots of other things to help you get there, and navigate it. Right. Again, looking at this table of resources, it's almost overwhelming when you say Azure, right? If you're just doing Power BI, we can help with that. If you're just wanting to do some AI things like with cognitive services, I think that's still called cognitive services.
Yeah, I think so.
Um, but um, And even if you're just doing databases, right? Say maybe you want to have it as your backup database, as your warm database. It's a fantastic place to do all of these things. And even if it's just kind of getting familiar with how Azure works, those are all great little, you know, ways of starting off. Um, there's no telling how long this Azure thing is going to last. I think it'll last a while, but because there's a lot of cool little things that it can do for us, even if you're in a development world, right? Being able to deploy a development environment within a matter of a few minutes that is exactly like a bug, right? You have a bug fix that you need to do, and you can see the exact environment of how that bug was taking place, and it stood up, and you can look through all the logs, you can look through all the things, you can actually run the systems through, the exact pace that it was going through when the bug happened, right? All of those tools and all those things are available to be done. And you don't have to build a lot of it. It's already built for you. You just got to kind of put a couple of pieces together and make a few connections, and voila. So it's an enterprise class data center without you having to spend all that upfront capital to making it happen, and it's just ready for you when you're ready to use it, right? If you don't use it, you don't pay for it. That's the
Yeah,
kind of the nice thing.
exactly. And I think one of the big things that I see, right, as we bring on customers, and you do as well, right, of all different stages of Azure life, right? The people that have never used Azure, the people that have Azure
Mhm.
and they're not really using it, but they want to accelerate and move more things to it. Or one of the things that we've had a lot in the last couple of years is we have customers that have Azure, they've been using Azure, but maybe they deployed it and didn't really know what they were doing. So we've been doing a lot of cleanup architecture as well.
Mhm.
And one of the best examples I have there is,
Thank you,
Azure really
COVID, right?
is, right? I mean, it is a pay per use. So each of these individual resources, if you use them, you pay for them. If you're not using them, you don't pay for them. But if you're using things and you're not intending to use them, or you forget to delete them, or you scale them or size them or do things differently, and
Right.
for some folks, if they didn't go at their Azure implementation with a plan, they can get really crazy situations that arise. And one of my favorites was a customer of ours that they had been managing their Azure either on their own or with another CSP that maybe wasn't as actively as involved as we are, and they transferred over to us about a year and a half ago. And one of the things that we do is we offer audits of their environment usage.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
And one of the things that we found was their Azure monthly bill is like $29,000 a month. So, a decent sized Azure bill, not crazy, but, big enough. And in auditing things, they were spending $8,000 a month on storage.
Wow.
And that's a lot of money on storage when you
Sure.
look at the price per gigabyte. And
Mhm.
so it started to prompt some questions. I'm like, so what do you guys have out here? Like what's the story? And then come to find out what it was is they had a couple of people that loved to take backups, and they never loved to remove them after they didn't need them. So they had
Sure.
files that were 100 gig a piece with multiple things of oops, emergency backup, blah, 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 that were dating back like 5 or 10 years that they're paying for on a monthly basis. And so
Mhm.
sometimes too, just bringing in and having somebody else to help monitor, right? We have reporting tools, we have analysis tools where we have the real knowledge of cost management and billing, right? One of the things in this table of resources to be able to help pinpoint, does it make sense that you're spending $8,000 a month on storage? Does it make sense that you're spending 20 grand a month on disks for your VMs? Because
Right.
that was the other thing we found is that they had a developer that thought you always provisioned every disk at 1 terabyte, even the
Oh,
OS disk.
wow. Yeah.
Right? And so when we go back and look, we're like, well, we can scale all of these disks down and we save 20, 30, 40% by
Mhm.
just right sizing. And so, it's
Yeah, I
that
was it's very
expertise.
similar story where we had a partner, who had a customer. who did a bunch of SQL. Their developers would go and grab from production SQL and use the, Azure SQL as their space. Well, they didn't know exactly which type of pricing model to really be in. So some of their developers would, and some of their IT admin would spin up a, single core CPU version, and it was like, well, you guys don't need that. The databases were only like 50 megs or whatever they were, not huge. And once we went through and got them all, there's another trite term, right sized, right? I hate all the trite terminology, but once you right size in Azure, they were like, oh, it saved them so much money. And what they were really looking for was just really the best practice, because once they got the best practice and it showed, oh, the best practice saved them money, they could go back to their IT leadership and say, we need to do more in Azure, and this is how we're going to do it. And they knew, okay, great. One, we know we're doing it the right way now. And it saved them, I think in this case, this was like $15,000 it saved them over the month of just SQL that they were doing.
Exactly, right. And then that translates to, well, now we have more budget for AI. Now we have budget for other things. And I
Yes.
think it's one of those things, we see so much of it, but that's what we do, right? We're in Azure all day, every day, right? We have, hundreds and hundreds of subscriptions and things that we're doing. So we have there's method to the madness of what we're doing. We're not just like, oh gosh, how am I going to configure this? How am I going to deploy this? And I think it's one of the big things that you get where, if you go at it alone, if you're going to do it, you can, right? You absolutely can. But if you're doing this from a business perspective, whether it be cost, whether it be security, whether it be um, resiliency, in terms of regional failover, global
Mhm.
recovery, those are some of the things that aren't for the faint of heart. And sometimes, right, a lot of times we're trying to come up with answers that are like, hey, this is it. This is how you do it. The other thing that you're going to be able to get when we go with a CSP, and one of the reasons why, I'm really pushing this concept of don't go at it alone, is there are times and places where Azure can't do what you want. And one of my favorite ones, just because it's a really fun one and hopefully we'll eventually get support for it, but content management systems or platforms that make changes to the files on disk in an app service are basically still impossible in Azure to use app service and do a geo-redundant deploy, right? There's always been talk about syncing, but since the file systems are different, right? It's one of those things, and we get questions all the time. Well, I want to deploy XYZ content management system, and I want to be active in 3 different regions. And I'm like, you know what? That is one of those things that's really a tall order, right? If you go back to VMs and do some other things, you can, but like app service as a whole, the platform doesn't
Right.
support it.
Right.
And but what we're doing is we're all aware of this, right? And we're just waiting for, is there ever going to be an announcement?
Mhm.
Maybe there
Sure.
will be. We'll be the first to know to be able to help, drive some of that stuff forward. And I think the other thing from a financial perspective, and I think it's, you know, we can never make a promise anywhere. But one of the things too that we have availability through the partner channel or through what TD SYNNEX may have or other things, we're also aware of incentive programs, and they change year by year, sometimes quarter by quarter, where, you know, they're not always just for big business, right?
Mhm.
SMB and the others have them too. We know those programs as well, right? It may not be much. It may be a $500 kickback or a $1,000 kickback,
Sure.
but there are resources available, and that's one of the other big values I think that we provide, against our customer bases as well, is to help. How do you actually move forward with that and be able to do it? And so, from my perspective, I really just love to be able to kind of share some of the things that we're able to do here. Is there any other thoughts you have, TJ, on the concept of CSPs, Azure, and what people should do, especially those that are maybe considering a move to Azure, or maybe they're in Azure and they're in over their head with their bill,
Yeah.
that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
I think that, I think one of the best channels, and I don't mean to take away from the Microsoft Direct, but I think when you're going Microsoft Direct, I think, unless you have a huge team behind you, it's really best to have that support of the CSP channel, the CSP partner behind you, and the distributor like TD SYNNEX, because when inevitably you're going to have questions or something's not going to work right, and we get it all the time from either the support call or from an onboarding standpoint, right? There's all kinds of things that just sometimes just don't make sense as to why Microsoft's doing it that way, and that's just the way Microsoft does it. At least you have somebody to call, and can get a quick answer when, especially from a partner to distributor, and then we can even leverage other channels inside the Microsoft ecosystem, outside of the support arms sometimes to get some answers because we get to talk to the security teams and we get to talk to the developers on the intra teams and stuff of that sort. So, lots of different connections that we provide, that you really can't get even if you were direct and even if you're a large enterprise, unless you're working on kind of a special project. And that's the
Yep.
other thing that we can bring too is, hey, maybe you do have this special project. We can bubble it up, talk to the right people inside Microsoft and get you the visibility. Say you want to do a big AI push and a big AI rollout to everything inside your organization. Well, unless you're a large enterprise or a Fortune like 100 company, you're not going to get that visibility unless you really come through the CSP channel.
Yep, because we have doors we can knock on. I think that the support is probably the one thing that is completely under realized. I think, it's very rare that Azure has big outages. It's very rare that we actually have an Azure related issue. Most of the time, right, the issues are we configured something incorrectly, somebody turned the wrong thing off, somebody did something.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it does happen. And, one of the things that we get with our partnership, our arrangement, and then everybody that's under our umbrella, right, is we do have that enterprise support agreement with Microsoft that just kind of comes along with everything. But then we also hear about it, right? We are getting notifications and our teams are aware because we have so much going on in Azure that East US 2 has an issue, we hear about it and we're able to be proactive to say, hey, you know what? Yep, I know this is issues going on. Here's where the status is. Here's what's going on. You don't need to create a support ticket. We're already on it. We know what's going on. Or even, regional things like we have connections and sometimes are able to know, hey, this region has more capacity. You should maybe deploy over here. This might be a better scenario. So we do have a lot of that support benefit as well. It's a we hope you never need it. The times you do,
Right.
it's absolutely fantastic because, support in Azure in the public space, it's just like a lot of other support these days. You fire
Right.
off a message and you hope that you bubble up.
Right.
Your database as one little company in wherever you're at isn't going to, necessarily get that big emergency response. We have ways to either help you solve it because we know it,
Mm-hmm.
get our people, or escalate within. And, in the, I don't know, handful of times that we've had to actually escalate up to Microsoft through the partner channels for one of our CSP customers having an Azure issue. My average response time from submission to a human interaction is under 18 minutes. And you know what? I can't really complain.
Right.
Um, we don't always get an answer, or it's not always the answer we want.
Right.
Sometimes, like we've found bugs, in various things, and they've taken a while to resolve. But we get answers really, really quickly, and I think that's one of the things that our customers really see in that value, right? Those that are with us, they're like, well, gosh, you got us an answer and I didn't know how. And so it's absolutely, one of the cool things that we can do, we just like to keep people updated here. Now, along the Azure front, I understand, TJ, you're embarking on a bit of a training initiative on your own here over the course of the next year, trying to help even further, communicate some of the new things. You want to tell us a little bit about what you've got going on? Make sure, people maybe check things out with you going forward
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The obviously AI, and obviously we heard from Ignite all of the new AI announcements, and AI has been the big thing over the last year and a half. But when it comes to the Microsoft ecosystem, there's a lot of like, yes, I want to do that, but I don't know how. And so I said, well, because I'm going to learn it too, and I'm going to learn it along with you guys. I need to learn it. If you guys are going to ask me questions, I need to be able to answer those questions. So I'm going to do kind of like a zero to hero journey over the course of this year of learning the AI Foundry product, which is all the stuff that's backed behind and what makes Copilot work in the Microsofts. It's the LLMs, it's the agents, it's all those things. So we're going to go on a journey this year of learning AI Foundry, starting with the first 5 weeks of being, let's get us to that hello world version of AI Foundry. And then the next 5 weeks will be learning the LLM side. What LLMs do I need to have in here? And just kind of moving through different 5 week segments of AI Foundry, and maybe have some guest bloggers, guest speakers in on that whole process as well. So from starting here in this week or next week, we'll get going on that little project and learning all the AI things that are down there in the Microsoft eco world.
Well, that's awesome. I'll make sure to update the show notes and give people a link once you get the actual links out there. We'll also link out to your LinkedIn. I wish you the best of luck with that. I think one of the biggest things for all of us on the Azure front, the names of everything have been changing. So my hope to you is that through the course of this year, that maybe the names of the things that you're going to talk about will all stay the same.
All stay the same. Yes.
I doubt it will happen, but it's okay, right? That's what we've got going on here, and I really appreciate your time today. For those of you watching, please do subscribe for new things. Share your comments if you've had experiences. I know that not everyone has the same experience with their CSPs. And I think one of the keys for me and what I do as a business owner and why we stick with SYNNEX is we want to provide that very best experience to our customers. TD SYNNEX is a great partner for us in doing so. And we've definitely helped folks out that haven't had that experience. The things we're talking about today, the services that we're talking about today, those are things that should just be part and parcel of working with the CSP. It's not that we're charging thousands and thousands of dollars to do the things that we're talking about. It's part of the value you get with a CSP. So if you're paying out the ear for some of that stuff, right? If you want us to stand it up, right? There may be some things, but you want that architecture guidance, that help. Why are you spending? How are you spending? How can we help streamline? Don't hesitate. Reach out to reach out to me. Reach out to my company, Iowa Computer Gurus, linked in the show notes and everything as well. And we'll see you all next time on the next episode of the Tech Vault.
Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.